Welcome back to Sports in Twinsview. In this video, I want to talk about the state of Safa. Now, for those who may not know, Safa is the South African Football Association. Essentially, it's the mother body of South African football. When I am saying South African football, I'm talking about Bafana, the South African men's national football team, Banyana, the women's, national football team. I'm talking about under 20 Bafana, they're called the Amachitas. You have the under 17 Bafana, Amajimbos, that's what they're called. You have the under 20 ladies, under 17 ladies. They also, I guess, the other types of sporting codes that are under SAFA. You have what's this thing? You have beach football that's also under SAFA. You have the five-a-side national team. There's a five-a-side national team under SAFA. We have an EA Sports national team. So it's just everything football, right? Is under everything football with regards to South Africa is under SAFA. But bear in mind we also have the PSL. PSL is the mother body of the South African Football League. You know what I mean? Yeah, so South African club football is under PSL. That's a separate thing from SAFA. However, SAFA is SAFA is the mother body essentially. So when FIFA send people a delegation to come to South Africa to talk football, to negotiate, to I guess implement policies, football policies and the like, they go to people at SAFA. If CAF are doing a similar thing, they bring in CAF are bringing delegations to implement policies to talk about South African football development. They go to SAFA. I guess if the South African government itself, if when it invests, it has I think a monthly or rather an annual sports budget. Of the budget goes to various sporting codes. One of the sporting codes it goes to is football, right? So that money it trickles down to SAFA, then SAFA then spreads it out. I guess accordingly. So essentially SAFA is the big dog in South Africa, and I just want to talk about the state of it, SAFA, that is. And with that said, please stay tuned. Okay, cool. So I think as you may know, or rather as I think you've seen it around social media, the news, I guess the people you're speaking to, I'm talking to you, the subscribers, the people you're talking to with regards to football, South African football. People are saying relatively we're at a good place at the moment. We have the national team, they qualified for the World Cup. They're going to play Mexico, opening game of the FIFA World Cup, 11th of June, if I'm not mistaken. So just again, reminders, set your reminders for that game. It's going to be one of the bigger games. Opening game, by the way. So they qualified. You have the women who have been doing relatively well, qualifying for AFCONs. Recently, they I think a few years ago, just a few years ago, I think maybe 2 or something, or 3 years ago, they won the AFCON, African Cup of Nations, the Banyana that is, and they've been consistently qualifying for the AFCON and have been performing relatively well. World Cup qualifiers, they do qualify, not all the time, but they're quite consistent with that regard. You have the men's, the younger national team, football national team, you have the under 20s. They've been performing relatively well in the African continent. The international games they've been doing, we hold our own in a way. Excuse me. Then you have under 17 football national team. They won AFCON last year, right? They did. So that was very, very good achievement. As a country, under 17 football national team winning a continental tournament it's one of the bigger tournaments, under 17 tournaments on the planet, and they won that, which is amazing. They qualified for the World Cup. I think they got out of the round of 16, if I'm not mistaken. And let's talk about why or what led to them getting out. That's kind of involves SAFA, the mother body essentially. So how's it, Sports in Twinsview subscribers? Point of correction:
yeah, I don't know why I ended up mixing the two. It's the under 20 squad that actually won the AFCON last year, not the under 17 squad. Under 20. Under 20 squad is also the same, squad that did relatively well in the World Cup. So yeah, I had mixed the two. Again, point of correction, it happens. Let's get back to the video.
Relatively speaking, we've been doing well. That's what people are going to tell you. I mean, that's what I'm going to tell you. Essentially, like if I guess we're having a conversation about football, relatively speaking, I'm going to tell you that yeah, we are in a good place. We are in a good spot. You know what I mean? Again, Bafana, they've been very consistent. The performances of late, not really, but you know, relatively speaking, they've been doing well. The boys, that is Bafana. So again, yeah, that's the narrative. That's the message. You know what I mean? However, having said that, I think that holistically, it isn't Safa, the federation isn't in a good place because yes, all these national teams achieving these these milestones, the tournament, achieving winning tournaments, qualifying for World Cup tournaments. It's very good for Safa. It shows that I guess the federation did put in a certain amount of time work in order to I guess achieve their goals, objectives, and the like. So yeah, that regard, because they're winning, therefore Safa is a very good federation, one of the best in the African continent. That is, I guess, the narrative. You know what I mean? However, again, holistically, that isn't the case. And I'll tell you why. For the longest of times, Safa has been the people at the helm of Safa. The executives, the members, the chair members. You know what I mean? The guys at the top. Excuse me. To be honest, they haven't been leading. They haven't been the best. They haven't been the best at governing the federation. They haven't been the best at a lot of things. Again, for the longest of times, you have players, you have national team players, men and women, complaining about not getting paid. Essentially, I mean, you get called from your club to come play for your country, to represent your country in a qualifying game for an AFCON for World Cup. You get called to represent your country in a World Cup tournament. You get called for a friendly match. And all of that. That traveling requires, obviously money to travel and do all other things. Again, you leave your club where they are paying you to come represent your country, which is amazing. I mean, in every sporting code, people do that. However, they do get paid for it, but that's not the case for Safa all the time. Again, I say this throughout. This has been happening for the longest of times. Players complaining. Apologies. Players complaining that they aren't getting paid. And this leads to players striking. I remember there was a situation, I think 2024, the Banyana ladies game that they were going to play. They decided not to. The players are striking. They said they don't want to play because they didn't get paid. And Patrice Motsepe or the Motsepe Foundation, they pitched in and they had to. I guess they had to pay them because Safa were not going to get paid. And again, this has been. They've been perpetuating this type of not paying people for a long time, and that's one of the things that is an issue with Safa, not paying people at all, and that does hinder a player from. People are happy that they are representing the country. However, I mean, you need to get incentivized. I mean, you're obligated. I mean, you need to get incentivized, right, by law. You know what I mean, and that doesn't happen. And we can talk about the development side of South African football. It isn't the best, you know what I mean? If we're being totally honest, or rather, so development-wise, maybe one can compare it to rugby. Rugby development, in South Africa. If you're South African or if you're into rugby worldwide, you do know that South Africa is the best, I guess, rugby development system on the planet. I think New Zealand is also good. English guys are also good. Australia, but yeah, South Africa is literally, I think it's an objective opinion, sentiment, right? So I'm comparing it to that. Compared to that, Safa haven't really been doing well with that regard, because there's so many South African youngsters in South Africa that don't get the recognition they deserve. Or I mean, a person plays well in a specific district or town, but doesn't have the resources to get to the bigger clubs, or doesn't have the resources, yeah, essentially to go to certain trials, and that hinders. It's everything is a ripple effect. It hinders it hinders the overall development system, because there are a plethora of players that don't get the recognition they deserve. You have so again, back to the rugby thing. With rugby, there's a certain direction. There is it's a direction you take. People understand what you need to do to become a Springbok, a South African rugby player. Well, it's very difficult actually. You have to be very good. However, there's an understanding that you primary you start doing some rugby. You start playing rugby in primary. I think there are a number of players that started playing rugby quite later in their, I guess, schooling life, maybe high school or whatever the case is. But generally speaking, primary, play rugby, play with the feet, you go, yeah, so you play in primary, those school rugby primary, or you go to a club. Then after that, you try to get into a relatively good high school, or you get scouted. You know what I mean? The scouting system in rugby is also very good. The schools with proper, I guess, rugby resources, facilities, they scout players from all over the country, players who are in rural areas, townships, smaller schools, who are in suburbs, but the school in that suburb isn't that big in rugby. However, there is that one player that is good, so they take him, they bring them into their schooling system. I'm talking about schools like Cares, JP, I don't know, Great College, St. Andrews in the Eastern Cape, DHS, Durban High School, a plethora of schools in South Africa. They do this thing where you scout players from all over the place, and then said players you then get into that environment, that rugby environment, where you grow as a rugby player. You then participate in various rugby festivals every year, from under 13, 14, until matric, first team. You then progress to, there's a Grand Homo for the under 16s, which is I think an annual tournament where they get the best under 16 players. I could be wrong with the age, but under 16 players, very good under 16 players around the country, put them together in different teams. I guess the rugby clubs, their development teams, they put them in that type of team. After Grand Homo, we have what's the name of this one? This Grand Homo, Craven Week. Goodness me, this is a big one, where they get the best, I guess, high school players, put them in respective rugby teams, and then they go at it in tournaments and the like. And then after that, it's you then get to play for the clubs. The clubs, they pick those players from Craven Week, could pick you from Grand Home, or maybe straight from high school as well. You never know. And the best players from the Craven Week or Grand Home, they get picked for South African rugby, rugby under 18s, under 16s, and they play the international games against Argentina, France, England, and the like, New Zealand, obviously. And then the best, the creme de la creme, right, of those players, then you then start getting called Springbok call-ups, training Springbok. This is a national rugby team, you know what I mean? So it's not easy at all. I mean, while I'm explaining all of this, there are a number of players who are not picked. People are just in a very dire situation. I mean, the scouting system in itself has some questions, because people just buy players. So there are many other things that I haven't added that are quite it's very difficult. It is in a way difficult, but how there is still a route, a direction that one understands that they need to take in order to eventually become, or you can just be like people like Mampi and P. They didn't really go that route, that certain high school Grand Home or Crave, and Mampi didn't really go that route. The coach, Springbok coach, you saw him in a specific in a some other club, and he took him straight from the club. Again, Mampi didn't go this good high school route. He was his own, rural area, and he was just playing for another. I think it was a town club. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but he is one of the best players we've had. Wingers we've had, and he didn't really go that route. So again, the many routes you can take to become a rugby player, but there is a direction. Now back to football. We don't have that type of system or routes. I mean, it's you take your kid with football. You take your kid to a club in the town, a club in your respective, I guess, neighborhood, whatever the case is. If it's a township, a number of football clubs in the townships, here in the suburbs, in the suburbs, there are a number of clubs in the suburbs. You take them there, and from there you try to, you try to link your kid to the bigger clubs, or you hope that the people in that club your kid plays for have contact with scouts, networking and stuff. So there isn't a direction or a certain system. It's just very individualistic. I mean, you have to find your own way. Essentially, find your own way to make it out, to make it to the bigger clubs, or to make it as an international players. The schools that we see, the rugby schools also have a number of them also have the football. They also have football as a sport. They so that isn't, it's big, but it's not as big. It's not as popular as rugby. School football, that is not as popular as schoolboy rugby. So that people aren't really focused on that. So again, development wise, it isn't the best. Again, because the people at Safa haven't. I believe that they don't really have the willpower. People at the ham don't really have the willpower to implement a certain type of system, because someone can say that it is challenging to implement a system a system similar to, I don't know, usually comparing rugby, but a system similar to rugby. However, someone can say that it is difficult. However, look, if you just literally sit down with a bunch of oaks, you can. I speak to anyone on a random day. They can tell you how they can give you their own opinions as to how you can grow South African sports, and that opinion can turn into a plan. Plan can turn into a blueprint. Blueprint can be implemented, and bam, you have a system. So it's about sitting down and discussing and then implementing said plan that has been agreed upon. That isn't happening with the Safa guys, and that hinders. Overall, it hinders the national team setup, because it's in. Because relatively speaking, the younger in football, under 13, under 14, 16, 18, let's go down 12. Relatively speaking, we're on how do they say, a level playing field or something. Everyone is this, when I am talking about everyone, I'm talking about players from other countries as well. An under 16 South African player is. His skill set, technical ability, ball IQ is similar to one that is to a guy, a 16-year-old Spanish player. This is, again, one could say, but it's Europe. But I mean, in terms of development, if you actually think about this, and if you follow football, if you follow sports, I follow quite a, if you follow South African development, sports development, relatively speaking, people are similar. The players are similar. You know what I mean? The only difference with said player is that this player, Spanish player, he's in a certain system. So from 16, there's a direction he knows that he needs to take. Going to the certain club. Going to the certain academy that is going to, connect him to clubs, the national team. So this guy is literally growing. Technical ability, ball IQ, and the like is growing in all of that, and then becomes Mbappe, right? The 16-year-old, South African 16-year-old, who was similar to Mbappe at 16. Hear me out. Similar to Mbappe at 16. There isn't any specific system. He has to find his way to these football trials, club trials, get connected to what's this thing? A Kaiser Chiefs, or he might not. And the academy as well. There are very good South African academies. I think the School of Excellence, one of the more popular ones. Okay, connected to a School of Excellence, and then School of Excellence connects him to a big South African club or well-known South African club or an international, and then national team. So and that's very difficult for him because he has to find his way to those. If he doesn't know people, or yeah, essentially if you don't know people, you're not going to. You know what I mean? It's not really to a certain extent, it is about merit, but sometimes it's just, yeah, if you know, you need to know a guy, you need to know a guy. You know what I mean? And Safa isn't, because Safa has not come up with a certain type of system, it hinders a plethora of players from making it in the South African football development, and that, because it's like a domino effect, it hinders the national team setup. So yeah, a number of things that SAFA have not gotten right, and you have administrative issues. When every time again back to the players getting paid, every time players don't get paid, I'm sure the guys, the executives are getting paid. You know what I mean? So executive is getting paid, but the players aren't getting paid, and that hinders South African football in its entirety. Now, solutions. Yeah, I could go on and on about the many problems South I have, but yeah, I would be prolonging the video. Um, Before I talk about solutions, I mean the ladies' situation is also quite abysmal. I mean the national team ladies. There is a league, a ladies football league in South Africa. It isn't focused on a lot. That hinders South African development on the ladies' side as well. And again, it's a software. It's under, in a way, it's kind of under or related to software. And yeah, it goes back to what I was saying, that these guys, the people at the helm, they are just not doing what needs to be done in order to grow South African football, right? Solutions: get rid of the guys at the top, or rather, yeah, the guys at the top need to go. The likes, people like Denny Jordan. Denny Jordan, he is the president of SAFA. He's been the president for the longest of times. I do understand that presidents of various federations all around the world have a certain tenure. Denny Jordan had his tenure, but then he got re-elected for another one. So he's been in the game. He's been in the SAFA game for the longest of times, and people like him need to go. He might have done very good things for South African football in the past. However, when it's your time, it's your time. I mean, leave the football before the football leaves you. You know what I mean? And the football has left in Jordan. I don't think he has a willpower rather to fix the situations we have. And not just Danny Jordan, the people around him. Because also have a plethora of administrative issues in-house that need to be sorted out. You know what I mean? And you might ask, what type of person then, once he leaves, what type of person do we need to get? You need to get former football players, or former sports people who have represented the country, who have been in the battlefield. You know what I mean? Because those guys, because they were there, they understand what needs to be done in-house, and I believe a person like that would be a very good fit as a president of SAFA. Or a person who, SAFA needs a person who will treat SAFA like a company, a business. What do I mean by that? In a business, a CEO wants the business to grow, right? Wants the company to grow. How does he go about doing that? He hires the right people, in the right positions. He hires based on merits. He's not gonna, well, people do tend to do this, but to a certain extent. So you're not gonna hire a friend of yours. Let's say the friend is let's say you wanna get an accountant for a company. A very good accountant. Let's say your friend so happens to be a very good accountant. You might consider your friend because he's a very good accountant. However, if said friend isn't doing what he ought to be doing, you're gonna let him go as a CEO, because essentially you want the company to grow. You know what I mean? So that's the type of mindset, that's the type of person that needs to be at the helm at SAFA. Guys, we are going to implement said thing, and we are going to give it time and see how it grows. If it doesn't work, we're going to do something else. It's all about implementing, doing, not talking. You know what I mean? So that's the type of person that needs to be, hitting the flock, hitting the sheep and the like. So yeah, I think that's literally the main. That's a solution. That's the only type of solution one can come up with regard to the Safa situation. But what are your thoughts with this Safa thing? What have I not talked about with regard to Safa that you wanted me to talk about? Please just tell me in the comment section down below. Yeah, I think this is one of the things that needs to be talked about that isn't talked about on online on social media. People do talk about it in their own spaces, but no one really talks about it, I guess, the way I am talking about it. So yeah, I think this was a very important conversation. I think I might have more conversations about this in the future. So yeah, please do like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, thank you for watching. Again, I say comment down below. What do you think about this video? What are your sentiments towards Safa? What have I not talked about again? Any feedback, with regard to this video in its entirety, please just do let me know. And yeah, again, I say this, thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.